Okay, I'm ready. You guys ready? Cool. Let's rock and roll. Hey, I'm Andrew. This is the Bearded Friend podcast, and thanks for joining me on this episode. In this week's episode, I unfortunately don't have a guest, but I take a moment to chat to you guys about the podcast, but I'll definitely have a guest next time. Right, welcome to the Bearded Friend podcast. This is episode number 12, and thanks for joining me on this episode. So first, I'd like to make a correction. In the last podcast, I said that the episode number was number 10 when it was actually number 11. So I apologize for that, but I'm sure you guys will forgive me. I think I was just so excited to bring you that episode with Ross from Prime Circle that I just got ahead of myself, or in that case, a little bit behind. But anyway, this is episode 12, and I need to make an apology. This week I had a bit of a setback with my guests episode. So it's just me this week, and I hope you guys are okay with that. I would like to say thanks to everyone that's listened to the previous podcast, which is the one with Ross from Prime Circle. If you remember, if you listen to that episode, you will know that he's just embarked on his Bare Bones solo tour. I think his last gig is at the end of the month. So if you would like to go and watch him live, I would recommend you do that before the end of the month. If you go and if you haven't listened to the last episode, or you don't know what the dates are, I would recommend you go listen to the previous episode where all that information is in there. Then he's off to America, and he'll be back, and he'll continue with that tour. So then I would suggest that you check on you. If you don't get to see him before he goes, I would recommend that you check out internet or Facebook and keep an eye out there. And I'm sure when he gets back, he will publish his tour dates. Right, I want to say thank you very much to everyone that downloaded that podcast. It was very well received, which was really great for me. It's nice to know that there are lots of people out there that are downloading it and enjoying the content. And I hope that I can continue bringing you those kinds of conversations, and I hope you tune in for the next conversation episode, which will be in 2 weeks' time. Something else that I'm trying a little bit differently on this podcast is I'm actually videoing this podcast, and if you would like to watch it instead of listening to it, by all means go to my YouTube channel. If you go to YouTube and you search The Bearded Fen, you'll find it there, and hopefully you will like the video if you enjoy it. If you don't enjoy it, please give it a thumbs down. But if you do that, do me a favor, leave a comment in there. Give me some advice on how to improve the podcast and the video content. Hit the subscribe button there as well, and hit the bell and subscribe for all notifications. My intention is to bring you more video content related to the podcast, and so that will be coming to you in the future. And I hope you tune in for that. Right, on to today's episode. I've spoken about the videoing. The other thing I wanted to chat to you guys about is how do you support the podcast. And at the moment, all I'd like to ask is that you go to Apple Podcasts, where you can find this podcast, and give it a rating and leave a review. And that's one way other people can find out about this podcast. And I would also ask you to take the time to share it with your friends if you think it's worth them listening to it. And if you would like to give me some feedback on the podcast on how I can improve it, or just general comments about the podcast, please do so. I really appreciate that kind of feedback. And you can get hold of me by dropping me a DM on Instagram. So follow me on Instagram, drop me a DM, and let's engage on the podcast. So you can find me at The Bearded Fen. Just remember to put the full stops in between the words. And you can also send me an email on info@beardedfen.co.za, or you can find me on Twitter under the handle Drew Fen. Right, I would also like to ask you guys to send me some recommendations for podcast guests. I do have a long list of guests that I'm engaging with to set up conversations with them, but I would also like to put it out there and ask you guys to give me some ideas. If there's someone that you would like to hear on the podcast and you want me to sit down and have a chat to them, by all means send me that info as well. Remember, the theme of the podcast is motorcycles, tattoos, and craft. So craft is anything creative. So anything from craft beer making to local music and anything in between is a go. Right. Then I just wanted to chat about podcasts in general. So when I started my podcast, obviously you look at what's out there already, and I look to the podcasts that I listen to and see what I like in those podcasts and what I could use to create my podcast. But the problem is generally those podcasts are podcasts that are generated, or the content is created outside of South Africa, so they're not South African podcasts. And so, I got to thinking about, okay, so how do you make a successful podcast in South Africa? Because if I used YouTube as a benchmark or as an example, there are some really successful YouTubers in the US and other countries like Europe, and the same doesn't really go for South Africa. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see the same sort of following by South Africans of South African YouTubers like you do get in America. And I'm assuming that the same thing goes for podcasts. So my view is that you can't necessarily, or the question that I'm asking myself is, can you use the same formula as the guys in the US and other countries that have successful podcasts? I mean, the interesting thing, and I think the stat came from Gareth Cliff, he said that podcasts are growing by 70% year on year in the US. So, I mean, that's a really encouraging stat, but is that the same for South Africa? I'm not too sure. And so I'm a little bit reluctant to assume that one could use the same formula as in the US and try and make a successful podcast in South Africa. But I'm learning. I don't know what the answer is. And if you guys have got some thoughts on that, that would be great to hear. But at this point, I'm trying to work out what's the right formula for South Africa for my podcast. I know that there are quite a few South African podcasts out there, and some of them are successful, and but I don't think at the same sort of level of success as proportionally to, say, America. And and another thing that I've done is obviously when I've created my podcast, I'm sharing with my friends, and what I find quite interesting is quite a few of them don't know how to find the podcast. What app do they use? Can they do it on their phone? Do they have to do it on their browser? Can they do it on their browser? So there's quite a bit of education that goes along with that. And so that gives me the sense that quite a, anecdotal evidence is that quite a lot of people are not into podcasts. I mean, there are people that I have come across that are into podcasts, but they're generally into podcasts overseas. I haven't really heard anyone saying that they are listening to South African podcasts, which I think is a pity. And let's hope we can change that. And we can do that with your help. Right. So the other thing I wanted to ask is, if you are listening to podcasts, what sort of format do you enjoy? Do you audio only? you like the video? Would you like both? What are your thoughts on that? I actually do a mixture of both. There's some podcasts that I just listen to the audio, and the other podcasts that I actually watch the video, like for instance Joe Rogan is one of them. So I'm interested to know what sort of formats people enjoy the most or find the most beneficial to use. Great. So there are a couple of podcasts that I've added to my list of podcasts that I listen to. If you listen to one of my earlier episodes, you would have heard some of the podcasts that I listen to. And just to let you know some of the newer ones that I'm listening to, there was one podcast that I was listening to religiously, which was called Coffee House Blunders. Unfortunately, the guys have stopped that podcast for now. Hopefully they fire it up again. And what I liked about that podcast, it's just two guys, two friends living in different parts of America, hooking up once a week, having a conversation, almost like two mates having coffee and having a catch up. And I really enjoyed that podcast. It's not one of those heavy podcasts, and it was a great one to listen to on the way to work. So unfortunately, that one is not going anymore, but I found another one to replace it. And this one is called The Daily Talk Show. It's on an Australian podcast. They do the audio as well as the video. And currently they do it 5 times a week, so every weekday. And from the 1st of July, they're bumping that up to seven times a week. So all 7 days of the week, they will be doing a podcast episode. And the episodes run from 35 minutes to an hour. Generally, when there's just the two of them talking, it's about 30 to 40 minutes. And when they have a guest, it goes up to about an hour. But it's really great. I really enjoy watching that one because the body language just makes it more enjoyable. Whereas, like, for instance, like a Sam Harris podcast, I'm quite happy to listen to the audio. I don't necessarily need to watch the video. So anyway, I recommend you guys go and look up The Daily Talk Show. Listen to it, watch it. Let me know what you think. Drop those guys a message and let them know that you are watching from South Africa and that Andrew sent you, the Bearded Fen sent you. I think they will appreciate that as well. Another guy that I listen to and watch quite often, a guy by the name of Matt Diavella. I might have mentioned him before, but I just thought it was worth mentioning it again. He's a content creator or filmmaker. He's made some documentaries, and he went into full-time podcasting, I think about 2 years ago, maybe over 2 years ago. And he's had a very successful podcast. He's got a very strong following, and but he creates really, really great content, and it's really worth looking up his podcast on YouTube if you've never been exposed to it before. And if you want to, you can subscribe on Patreon to his channel, and you get extra content. So if you're interested in how he sets up his videos, how he films them, he goes into that, as well as you can ask him questions about anything about filmmaking, and also about his the content that he creates. He's also he's doing these sort of like monthly challenges: meditate for 30 days, get up early for 30 days, cold shower for 30 days, and then he gives you feedback on how that went in terms of creating that habit. And you can, if you're subscribing, you can ask him questions or even give him suggestions on challenges to do. So that's worth watching as well. Then coming a little bit closer to home, if you're enjoying the sort of music related conversations, perhaps check out Marshall Music's Facebook page and YouTube page. A guy by the name of Stuart Goodman. He has something, Stuart Chats, I think it's called, and he releases that once a week. It's video. I'm not too sure if he releases an audio version, but it's video. He actually streams it live. So if you catch that on a Wednesday evening, and you can listen to him talking to local musicians, finding out about their musical journey, where they started, what they're busy doing now, and where their future is going. So I would check that out. And also, do yourself a favor. Do a search on South African podcasts. Have a listen to some of them. Support them if you're enjoying them. Drop me a message. Let me know which ones you're listening to and which ones you're enjoying. And let's enjoy this journey together. So, before I end off, as you can see, I'm wearing a Bearded Fen hoodie. This merchandise is available for you to purchase. It comes in a white hoodie and a black hoodie, and you can find that on my Facebook page, Nerve Apparel SA. That's where you can order them. This is a black T-shirt. This is what the black hoodie logo would look like as well. It's in silver, and it's slightly different to the white one. But this T-shirt is made from combed cotton, so it's really soft. So it's a little bit softer than normal cotton T-shirts. So it's really great to wear. I hope you will consider buying a T-shirt or a hoodie. It would be really great. And if you're outside of South Africa and you would like to purchase one of these, by all means, drop me an email at andrew at nerveapparelsa.co.za, and I'll make a plan to get one to you. Anyway, I think I'm going to end it off there. Guys, thanks so much for tuning in. And that, my friends, is the end. I'll catch you next time.